What if I told you there's a specific dollar amount that completely rewires how your brain thinks about money? Not $1 million, not six figures, not even close. I'm talking about a number so achievable most people could hit it in a year, but so powerful it fundamentally changes every financial decision you make. That number is $15,000. Hi, I'm Matt. On this channel, I break down financial freedom strategies, wealth building psychology, and the real mechanics behind compound interest that help you build emergency funds and achieve financial independence. If you want practical advice on investment portfolios, passive income, and escaping the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle, make sure to subscribe. I've spent years studying financial psychology and watching people either build wealth or stay stuck in the same patterns. There's an invisible line at $15,000 where everything shifts. People who cross this threshold start moving faster toward financial freedom, while those who don't stay trapped in financial stress for decades. Here's what most people get wrong about building wealth. They think it's linear. Save $1,000 a month for 10 years, and you'll have $120,000. Simple math, right? But that's not how wealth actually works. Wealth building is exponential, not linear, and there are specific thresholds where the entire game changes. $15,000 is the first major threshold that separates people who will achieve financial freedom from those who will work until they're 70 and still worry about money. Before we dive into the math, let me paint you a picture of what life looks like on both sides of this line. Below $15,000 in savings, you're living in financial reaction mode. Your car breaks down and your stomach drops because that repair bill derails your entire month. Your company announces layoffs and you can't sleep because losing your job would be catastrophic. Someone offers you a better opportunity, but you can't take it because you need the security of your current paycheck. You see a great deal on something that could generate income, but you can't pull the trigger because the money isn't there. You're making decisions based on fear of what might happen, not what you actually want. But after you cross $15,000, everything shifts. Car needs repairs? Annoying, but you handle it and move on. Company announces layoffs, you update your resume and network because you'll be fine for months. Someone offers an opportunity, you evaluate it based on career potential, not desperation. That investment opportunity that popped up, you can actually consider it instead of watching it pass by. This is about crossing a psychological threshold where your brain stops operating in survival mode and starts thinking about growth and opportunity. And once that switch flips, everything accelerates. Research shows that people with $15,000 or more in emergency savings report significantly lower financial stress and make better financial decisions because they're not choosing from desperation. But here's what nobody talks about, and this is critical. The shift isn't just psychological, it's neurological. Studies in behavioral economics show that financial scarcity literally reduces cognitive bandwidth. When you're worried about money, your brain has less processing power available for complex decision-making and opportunity recognition. It's like trying to run multiple apps on your phone at 2% battery. Everything slows down, and you can only focus on basic functions. But when you have that $15,000 cushion, your brain suddenly has the bandwidth to think clearly. You can evaluate opportunities, plan for the future, and make strategic decisions instead of reactive ones. Think about being really hungry. You make terrible food choices, order too much, grab whatever's fastest. Your brain isn't thinking strategically in survival mode. It's just trying to solve the immediate crisis. The exact same thing happens with money. Living paycheck to paycheck with no emergency fund puts your brain in constant financial hunger mode, focused on immediate survival instead of long-term wealth building. Here's a real example. In 2024, when inflation hit hard in 2022 and continued through 2024, grocery prices jumped 20% over 2 years. Rent in major cities increased 15 to 30% in some markets. The people without emergency funds were absolutely devastated. They had to make brutal choices, skip meals to pay rent, take on credit card debt just to buy groceries, work extra hours at jobs they hated because they couldn't afford to lose any income. Many ended up in worse financial positions than before because high-interest debt compounded their problems. But people who had hit that $15,000 threshold? Uncomfortable, sure, nobody likes spending more on the same groceries, but they weren't in crisis. They absorbed the costs, adjusted their budget strategically, and some even picked up side hustles to accelerate wealth building. While others were struggling, a few took advantage of the chaos to invest when others were panicking. That's the difference between surviving and thriving, and it all comes down to crossing that $15,000 line. What percentage of your income are you actually keeping right now? Not what you think you're saving, but what's accumulating month after month. Here's the brutal truth. According to the Federal Reserve, nearly 40% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency without borrowing money. $400, less than most people spend on streaming, DoorDash, and coffee in a month. If 40% can't handle $400, imagine how few have saved $15,000. The number is depressingly low, which means if you hit this threshold, you're immediately in the top tier of financial stability in this country. But here's where it gets really interesting. Once you understand why $15,000 is so powerful, you start seeing opportunities everywhere that other people completely miss.
Let's talk about the math that makes this work. Because once you see these numbers, you can't unsee them. Let's say you're saving $1,000 every month and earning 8% annual return on your investments. Getting to your first $15,000 takes about 14 months of consistent saving and investing, a little over a year. That's doable for most people serious about building wealth. But here's what blows people's minds. Your second $15,000 doesn't take another 14 months. It only takes about 12 months. Write this down. You did the exact same work, saved the same $1,000 monthly, took the same risk, but shaved 2 full months off the timeline. Why? Because that first $15,000 is now working alongside your contributions, generating its own returns. That's compound interest kicking in. By your third $15,000, the timeline shrinks to 11 months. Once you hit $300,000 in your investment portfolio, you can generate the next $15,000 in just 7 months through returns alone, even without adding money. The same amount that took over a year initially is now happening almost automatically. This is why the first milestone feels impossible, but every milestone after gets progressively easier. When you invest $1,000 at 10% growth, you make $100. Apply that same 10% to $15,000, and you're looking at $1,500 in profit. Same investment, same time frame, same risk. The only difference is scale, and that scale transforms small percentage wins into real financial progress. And here's where 2024 and 2025 have been particularly interesting. High-yield savings accounts have been paying 4 to 5% interest, the highest in over a decade. If you have $15,000 earning 4.5% annually, that's $675 flowing in over a year without lifting a finger. Compare that to someone with $1,000 earning $45 annually. Nice, but not life-changing. But $675? That covers car insurance, funds a weekend trip. That's real money that makes a difference. But when you save $15,000, you've accomplished something far more valuable than accumulating money. You've rewired your brain and built the most critical financial habit you'll ever develop. Think about what it takes to save $15,000 from zero. Unless you're making ridiculous money or living rent-free, this requires serious discipline. You tracked every dollar, said no to things you wanted, resisted blowing your savings. You did this consistently for over a year. Pause for a second. You proved you can control your money instead of letting it control you. That's not just a financial skill, that's a life skill. But there's another shift that changes your entire career trajectory. Having $15,000 saved doesn't just change your relationship with money. It completely changes your relationship with work. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're trapped in whatever job you have. Your boss could be terrible, coworkers toxic, work mind-numbing. But you can't leave because you need that next paycheck. This puts you in a weak negotiating position. You can't ask for raises, push back on unreasonable demands, or explore other opportunities. But $15,000 changes everything. Suddenly, you have walking away money. You could quit tomorrow and survive 3 to 6 months while finding something better. This doesn't mean be reckless, but you're negotiating from strength instead of desperation. Would you walk away from your current job tomorrow if you had 6 months saved? Your answer reveals whether you're in the right position or just staying because you feel trapped. Here's what's crazy. Often you don't even need to use your walking away money. Just having it changes your demeanor at work. You become more confident, more assertive, more willing to take on challenging projects. And guess what? People notice. You get better assignments, more recognition, more money. It's like having a secret superpower that knowing it exists changes how you operate. And this has become even more relevant with the massive job market shifts in 2024 and 2025. Remote work has changed career dynamics. Companies hire talent from anywhere. The gig economy has exploded. Skills-based hiring is replacing degree requirements. But all these opportunities require financial flexibility. Starting a freelance career, taking a lower-paying startup position with upside, investing in new skills. None of these are possible living paycheck to paycheck. But with $15,000, you can take strategic risks that accelerate your career and income growth. If you're still watching, you're in the top 15% of viewers who actually care about building real wealth, instead of just consuming content. You're not looking for get-rich-quick schemes. You're looking for actual strategies that work. The next few minutes are going to show you exactly how to avoid the mistakes that keep most people stuck even after they hit $15,000.
Here's where most people mess this up, and I see it constantly. They finally hit $15,000, feel that psychological shift, and then immediately blow it on something that sets them back to zero. Maybe they decide they deserve a new car since they've been so disciplined, or they take an expensive vacation because they've earned it, or they use it as a down payment on a house they can't really afford. Don't do this. That $15,000 is not a reward for good behavior. It's the foundation of your entire financial future. It's the seed that grows into generational wealth if you're patient enough to let it compound. Let me show you what I mean. Between 2022 and 2024, we saw one of the most dramatic market corrections in recent history. Tech stocks crashed, crypto imploded, even supposedly stable investments took massive hits. The people without emergency funds were forced to sell at the worst possible time because they needed access to cash for living expenses. They locked in their losses and missed the entire recovery. But the people who had built that $15,000 emergency fund separate from their investment portfolio, they didn't have to touch their investments. They could ride out the storm, and even better, they could buy assets at massive discounts while everyone else was panicking. That's what having an emergency fund really means. It's not just protection against car repairs and medical bills. It's protection against being forced to make terrible financial decisions during the times when good decisions matter most. And it's the foundation that allows you to take advantage of opportunities when they appear. What opportunities did you miss last month because of money? Really think about that. A friend starting a business who needed investors, a killer deal on something that could have generated income, a chance to learn a skill that could have doubled your earning potential. These opportunities are everywhere, but most people can't see them because they're too busy worrying about making rent. But once you cross that $15,000 threshold, you start noticing opportunities that were always there. And this is where things get really interesting in 2024 and 2025. The AI revolution is creating entirely new categories of jobs and income opportunities that didn't exist 2 years ago. People are building AI-powered tools, offering AI consulting services, creating AI-generated content businesses. These are real opportunities with real money behind them, but they all require some level of financial runway to pursue. You need time to learn the skills. You need money to invest in tools and training. You need breathing room to experiment and figure out what works. The same pattern played out with every major technological shift. The internet boom in the late 90s and early 2000s, the mobile app explosion in the 2010s, the creator economy explosion during the pandemic. The people who built wealth from these opportunities weren't necessarily smarter or more talented than everyone else. They were the ones who had enough financial cushion to take risks and try things while others were stuck grinding at jobs they hated because they couldn't afford to do anything else. And here's something that might surprise you. Once you start thinking this way, you often realize you don't actually want half the stuff you thought you wanted. That bigger apartment, the extra space would be nice, but is it worth delaying your financial freedom by 2 years? That expensive hobby. It's fun, but there are probably cheaper ways to get the same satisfaction. The latest iPhone every year. Does it really improve your life enough to justify the cost? This isn't about becoming some penny-pinching miser who never enjoys anything. It's about becoming intentional with your money instead of letting it slip away on things that don't actually matter to you. When you have clear financial goals and understand the power of compound interest, it becomes much easier to distinguish between what you want and what you really want. And that distinction is everything. Calculate this yourself. Take whatever you're spending on things you don't really care about. Car payments on a vehicle that's more expensive than you need, subscriptions you barely use, eating out because you're too tired to cook. Add it all up for a month. Now multiply that by 12 for a year. Now imagine investing that money instead at an 8% return for 20 years. The numbers are going to shock you. That $500 a month in unnecessary expenses isn't just $6,000 a year. It's potentially over $275,000 in your investment account 2 decades from now.
And let me give you a real-world example of why this matters. During the Silicon Valley layoffs of 2023 and 2024, thousands of people who were making 6-figure salaries found themselves suddenly unemployed.
The ones who had been living up to their incomes, spending everything they made on expensive apartments and luxury cars and constant travel, were in complete panic mode. They were burning through their savings, taking jobs they didn't want, accepting massive pay cuts because they needed income immediately. But the people who had maintained strong emergency funds despite their high incomes, they were selective. They waited for the right opportunity. They negotiated from strength. Many of them ended up in better positions than before because they could afford to be patient. That's the power of financial independence. It's not about having so much money that you never have to work again. It's about having enough money that you can make decisions based on what's best for your life instead of what's necessary for survival. Are you building wealth or just surviving? Because there's a massive difference, and that difference starts at $15,000. Here's something else that happens around this level that will make you question everything you thought you knew about budgeting. You start caring less about small expenses and more about big ones. I know that sounds backwards, but hear me out. When you're broke, you obsess over every purchase. Should I get the name brand or generic? Is it worth spending $5 on coffee when I could make it at home? Should I splurge on the organic vegetables? These decisions consume mental energy because every dollar feels precious. But when you have a solid financial foundation, you realize these micro decisions are largely irrelevant to your financial future. The difference between spending $5 on coffee versus making it at home is maybe $1,200 per year if you're really going overboard. That's not nothing, but it's not going to make or break your path to financial freedom either. What matters are the big decisions: where you live, what you drive, how much you save, where you invest. These choices can swing your net worth by tens of thousands of dollars over time. So instead of agonizing over whether to buy the organic bananas, you focus your energy on optimizing your housing costs, maximizing your income, and making sure your investment strategy is solid. This shift in focus is incredibly liberating because it frees up mental bandwidth for the decisions that actually matter. You stop sweating the small stuff and start thinking strategically about wealth building. And the beautiful irony is that the person stressing about every $3 coffee purchase is usually the one who's hemorrhaging money on big decisions they haven't optimized. Meanwhile, the person who understands opportunity cost is happily buying the expensive coffee because they've nailed the big stuff and know that the small indulgences are mathematically irrelevant. The average person spends more on their car over a lifetime than it would take to achieve financial independence. Between car payments, insurance, maintenance, and gas, most people drop around $800 monthly on transportation. Over 40 years, that's $384,000 just to get from point A to point B. Meanwhile, they're complaining they can't afford retirement planning. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, it loses 20% of its value. You are actively destroying wealth. Compare that to investing the same amount in a diversified investment portfolio. Instead of watching your money evaporate, you're watching it multiply through compound interest.
So here's where we are. You now understand why $15,000 isn't just a number, it's a psychological threshold that completely changes how your brain processes money, opportunity, and risk. It's the mathematical foundation that makes compound interest work in your favor instead of against you. It's the career insurance policy that lets you negotiate from strength instead of desperation. And it's the opportunity fund that lets you take advantage of the moments that actually build wealth instead of just watching them pass by. But here's the thing nobody wants to hear. Most people will never hit this number. They'll spend their entire lives living paycheck to paycheck, making excuses about why they can't save, blaming external circumstances instead of taking control of what they can actually change. And you know what? That's fine. More opportunity for the people who actually take this seriously. Because every person who stays stuck in the cycle creates more opportunities for those of us who break out of it. The question isn't whether $15,000 is achievable. We both know it is. The question is whether you're willing to do what it takes to get there. Are you willing to say no to things that don't matter so you can say yes to the life you actually want? Are you willing to track every dollar, optimize every big decision, and stay disciplined when everyone around you is spending like there's no tomorrow? What's your number? Not the number financial gurus tell you to aim for, not what society says you should have. What's the actual number that would change everything for you? Maybe your number isn't $15,000. Maybe it's $10,000 or $25,000. Whatever it is, that's your threshold. That's the invisible line between the life you're living now and the life you could be living.
One more thing before you go. Every single person who has ever built real wealth started exactly where you are right now. Zero was the beginning of everything that came after. The difference between the people who made it and the people who didn't wasn't talent or luck or perfect timing. It was the decision to start and the discipline to keep going when it got hard. You already know what you need to do. The only question is whether you'll actually do it.